Hi, I'm Jim Bearden, and this is Lesson 5 in Leadership at the Points of Contact. In this section of the program, we're looking at what I consider to be one of the most important roles that organizational leaders play, and that is to consciously create cultures that reinforce and support behavior essential to organizational success. In a previous lesson, we defined that type of culture as one that is hero-friendly, a hero-friendly culture, a culture in which employees are encouraged, even expected, to make what we refer to as heroic choices. And we said there were 4 examples. We want employees to speak up. We want employees to step up. We want employees to listen up. And we want employees who are willing to take reasonable risks. The truth is, there are reasons why employees would be reluctant to do so. We talked about those a little bit in a previous meeting. Maybe they have never been invited to do so. Maybe they are afraid that it's unsafe to do so. And maybe no one has taken the time to fully explain exactly what's expected. And so we covered that in the previous lesson. The first step that leaders take to consciously create a culture is to ensure that employees understand exactly what you expect. Now back to the safety issue. That raises another barrier, if you will. The barrier of whether or not it is safe for them to step up, speak up, and do the other things we associate with heroic behavior. The second step in our 6 steps for creating a culture then is to identify and eliminate barriers, the things that would preclude employees from behaving in the ways that we expect. Now, based on my experience with consulting clients, there are 2 types of barriers that you can expect to encounter. The first would be what I call perceived barriers, and the second type are the real barriers. And here, the best way to illustrate this difference is by sharing an experience I had with a consulting client. I just finished a rather extensive consulting engagement for an engineering firm, and as part of that, the members of the leadership team and I created a list of behaviors that were expected and shared those expectations with the staff. The second step, identify and eliminate barriers, we went out to the staff and asked them, what are some of the barriers? What are some of the things that would keep you from engaging in this sort of behavior? In response to that, we got a pretty extensive list, but one of the recurring themes was fear of retribution. Employees essentially said that I'm afraid if I challenge the status quo, I'm afraid if I ask questions or offer suggestions that my boss, my supervisor, my manager is going to respond negatively, maybe even punitively toward me. Now that's kind of alarming when you hear people who are afraid for their job security, are afraid to engage in behavior that most would agree is essential to sustaining success. And so I went to the staff and did a series of interviews. And in the interviews, I asked this question: how often have you had that experience in this firm? How often have you challenged the status quo or offered suggestions or questioned your manager and received some sort of punitive response? You know what the answer was? Never. It had never happened in that organization, and yet people, either as a result of conditioning in other jobs or just assumption, believed that that was going to be the case there. That's a perceived barrier. Now, it doesn't mean that it's any less in play. It still would serve as a barrier, but it's not a barrier based on experiences they've had in your organization. The real barriers then are obviously the ones that they have had firsthand experience with. The real barriers are ones that are going to require intervention, action by you and the other members of your leadership team in order to eliminate them. And make no mistake about it, until and unless you eliminate the barriers, the expectation you have for employee behavior is going to remain unrealized, unmet, unrealistic even. Now, in this lesson this week, we have a rather long list of action items. So I want to turn to the action items now because it's very important for you in order to translate the theory from this lesson into leadership behavior to complete these action items. There are 5 of them. Here we go. First, I want you and the other members of your leadership team to look at the list of behaviors you expect from employees in the situations you identified in the previous lesson. 2, for each of those behaviors, I want you and the other members of your leadership team to describe possible barriers, reasons employees might be reluctant to engage in those behaviors. 3, I then want you and the other members of your leadership team to describe the things you can do to eliminate those barriers. 4, after telling employees the behaviors you expect from them, I want you to ask them to describe the things they see as barriers, the reasons they would be reluctant to engage in those behaviors. And finally, number 5, I want you to then ask them to describe the things that would have to happen for them to be comfortable with those behaviors. Remember, completing the action items is essential to maximizing the learning potential in this program, and I strongly encourage you to do just that.